It's an absolutely wild day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just made a ton of announcements and showed off a whole bunch of cards. We've got crazy slivers, insane Eldrazi, we've got Doctor Who, Commander decks, and Plane Chase cards, and we even have The Walking Dead in the upcoming Eldraine set.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a big fat juicy installment of Mega Magic News. Wizards of the Coast is doing a million things at once. So today, instead of talking about the bad times, we're going to be talking about all the crazy good times that are going on. And with no further ado, we dive in. We're going to start out talking about being tempted by the ring. So, Call of the Ring is an enchantment that costs 1 black and 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. Whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So this is going to be repeatable card draw at the cost of your life, but more importantly, it forces the ring to tempt you every turn. Now, to understand how the ring tempting you works, we actually have a rules text card that has 2 different sides. So, taking a look at it, there is a lot of text here, but it's not quite as complicated as it seems. So, as the ring tempts you, you get an emblem named the ring if you don't already have it. Then your emblem gains its next ability, and you choose a creature you control to become or remain your ring bearer. The ring can tempt you even if you don't control a creature, so that enchantment will trigger every turn even if you don't have creatures out. The ring gains its abilities in order from top to bottom. Once it gains an ability, it has that ability for the rest of the game. So the ring's going to scale up in power. Each time the ring tempts you, you must choose a creature if you control one. So you have to give somebody the ring. And each player can have only 1 emblem named the ring and only 1 ring bearer at a time. So the powers of the ring side, the first is your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. I think imbuing legendary into a creature is a pretty funky concept. This is a new way to slap it on essentially any creature you want. The next ability is whenever your ring bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. The ability after that is whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at end of combat. And the final ability is whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. This is a very powerful scaling, right? It gets crazy. First of all, it's just, hey, I can't be blocked by creatures that are bigger than me. And then it turns into, now I'm drawing cards and filtering through stuff in my deck. Now I'm smoking your creatures. Oh, and by the way, every time I hit a player, all of my opponents lose 3 life. This is a massive level of power. The question is whether you're really going to be able to connect with those ring-bearing creatures, and obviously it becomes much easier when you have those abilities to back it up. The Lord of the Rings stuff is pretty wild. We actually also get Sauron, the Necromancer, and I definitely do dig these specialized Lord of the Rings frames with the Elvish script around them. It looks epic. So Sauron, the Necromancer, 2 black and 3, gets you a 4/4 legendary avatar horror. He has Menace. Whenever he attacks, exile target creature card from your graveyard. Create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black wraith with Menace. At the beginning of the next end step, exile that token unless Sauron is your ring bearer. This is such an insane concept. I guess the idea is that you're creating ring wraiths out of these creatures that are in the graveyard. You're bringing them back to serve you beyond the grave, which is a very, very flavorful concept. The Lord of the Rings stuff is looking really solid from a flavor perspective, and also some of this stuff is looking pretty powerful. I think it's going to be a mixed bag with this set because they're not really going to have the ability to reprint these cards easily, so they're not going to want to probably top load too much power into too many cards, but this is a strong card. Now, let's talk about Commander Master's insanity in the form of Eldrazi. We've got Zolodok, the Void Gorger. First of all, straight out on the name, I love the idea of gorging on the void. The void is something without form. It's empty and endless. How do you gorge on something that doesn't have any kind of form? That is very flavorful. So this is 1 colorless and 5 for a legendary Eldrazi. He has colorless spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have Cascade. So he encourages you to cast the biggest, beefiest, insane Eldrazi spells that you have, and as a result, he will let you double Cascade. And there's an extra aspect of this that I find very enjoyable, and that's that one of the Cascades is capitalized and the second isn't, because that's how sentences work, right? But it just ends up looking like the second Cascade isn't as important. Like his first 2 arms are up in the air and he's like, Cascade! And the second time he's like, Cascade. It just gives me that vibe. I don't know why I like that so much, but I absolutely do. And the Eldrazi aren't the only ones getting some powerhouse insanity. We are getting the most bonkers sliver in the form of Sliver Gravemother. And I read this like 8 times as Sliver Grandmother. Like, it took me a while to realize, wait. This makes more sense as Gravemother, I guess. So the legend rule doesn't apply to slivers you control. This is insane. This is Wizards of the Coast going, you know how you guys love your legendary slivers and paying your 5 mana, putting out your sliver queens? What if you could just have multiple sliver queens out? What if you could have multiple sliver legions out, right? Like that's what this is. This is go collect up all the 5-color legendaries, slap them in your sliver deck, and the Sliver Gravemother counts itself, right? So you can play 5. Wow, okay. I'm getting a little overboard. You can slip an extra one and don't tell your opponent, but you can run 5 of these in your deck. Magic Historian approved. So the legend rule doesn't apply. Still, the 4 of rule does apply. Each sliver creature card in your graveyard has Encore 5, or Encore X, where X is its mana value, and then it has Encore 5 down at the bottom. Man, I'm getting really tripped up with these 5s here. The 5 casting cost, you can play 5 of them, whatever. Either way, you can play them back out of your graveyard, and it has Encore too. That's nutty. Encore is the one where it creates tokens and sends it at all. Like, this is a commander heavy ability, and these are just the face cards of those decks, right? We don't know what else we're going to see in terms of the power in these decks, but we have more cards from the commander decks. We have Commodore Guff, which is a really cool include. If you guys don't know who he is, Commodore Guff is an old school planeswalker, but he's almost like Deadpool, not in terms of being so over the top, but he is aware that he's a character in the multiverse and talks in that fashion, and he's the only person in the entirety of Magic's history, as far as I know, who actually does have that sort of a setup, so it makes him particularly unique. So Commodore Guff is 1 white, 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. At the beginning of your end step, put a loyalty counter on another target planeswalker you control. That's such a funky ability. +1, create a 1/1 red wizard creature token with tap, add a red, spend this mana only to cast a planeswalker spell. -3, you draw X cards and Commodore Guff deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. And Commodore Guff can be your commander. So the vibe that this has given me is kind of when they all got together during Invasion. You had Urza and these other planeswalkers all working together. So it does fit into that flavor. Admittedly, when I think of Commodore Guff, I just think of somebody breaking the fourth wall. So I don't have like a huge level of flavor to measure him against because he doesn't play a huge role in the multiverse. But ultimately, making yourself little wizards, boosting up your different planeswalkers, that sort of camaraderie concept, I like it as a card. It doesn't feel super powerful off the top, but maybe it's stronger than I'm thinking, right? The 4th Commander Masters commander card we have to talk about is Anaxia, Hand of Erebos. This is a funky idea. So this is a legendary enchantment demigod. She has menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have menace. Whenever she enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to one target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature token in addition to its other types. Wow, that feels pretty similar to Sauron in some ways, doesn't it? But man, I gotta say, I really, really love the flavor of the Theros gods and the fact that they are made up out of the star stuff, and you can actually see it in their artwork. It's a really nice touch that you get there, right? So, the next thing that I want to talk about is the Doctor Who commander decks. So, they're going to have straight up 4 different commander decks for Doctor Who, which is pretty wild. I wasn't expecting this full-on treatment, but it looks like everything going forward is going to start to have that going on. So we've got a scenario we're going to get the Doctor Who situation. We're also going to get an actual Doctor Who plane chase setup as well. And I love that Wizards of the Coast is embracing plane chase more fully here, right? Like, they're going full on with this commander stuff. Not only are they going, we're going to do plane chase, but they're also bringing in Doctor's Companion, which is really just like the partner mechanic. But Doctor's Companion says you can have 2 commanders if the other is the Doctor. So it kind of, we've seen partner in the past, and then we saw Friends forever when it came to the one secret layer that was based around Stranger Things. So this is them finding a tweak somewhere in between where it's unique to the cards that specifically come from Doctor Who, but can actually move outside of it as well, right? And so that is pretty funky to me. Now, returning to the plane chase concept, you've got the Lux Foundation library, which to me, I don't know if this like resonates with the flavor of Doctor Who, but it is a fun plane chase plane. You've got it out. Players have no maximum hand size. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. To me, that's the piracy effect from the old days back in Mercadian Masks. I love any creatures that let you draw off of combat damage, and this is going to feel really swingy. Like, I view these through the prism of how they're going to function with my cube, and this thing would be insane. So if you don't know how plane chase works, basically you end up rolling dice, and there is a particular symbol that represents chaos on the die. And when you roll that, chaos ensues, which is a great way of describing it. They didn't actually call it that before. They just had the symbol. Now it's chaos ensues. So whenever chaos ensues, put a shadow counter on target creature. A creature with shadow can block or be blocked only by creatures with shadow. So I don't know if this library is inhabited by spirits, but in terms of shadow, the way that works in Magic flavor is shadow is a being that's essentially trapped between 2 different worlds. We initially saw shadow when we had the Wrathy overlay, and there were a bunch of different individuals who got trapped in between the worlds. So is that what's going on with this library? That's one thing I don't know. I'm not familiar with Doctor Who overall, because when I was a kid, first of all, I'm not really into sci-fi, but also when I was a kid, Doctor Who just scared me with that crazy music. But if you love Doctor Who, like love Doctor Who, you're going to adore this set of lands that they've created, because they have the TARDIS, which is this crazy, it looks like a phone booth, right? But it's apparently to call the police if you need to. And so the idea is outside, it looks almost like Bill and Ted's travel and phone booth, but inside it's like a gigantic interdimensional mansion or something. Doctor Who is way crazier than I thought it was. At first I thought it was just like Science Man goes through the universe, but it turns out Doctor Who is like the last of his kind, of some kind of regenerative super beings or something, and has like crazy powers. There's way more to him than he's just some dude who's traveling around in space. So Doctor Who is a big deal, and this land set actually looks really good. The lands look sweet. I dig the overall vibe of it. I like the island specifically just because the volcano on it has this crazy almost design. Maybe it's a pyramid, who knows, but it gives me a volcano vibe because it looks like lava's flowing down it, although that could just be the sun reflecting off it. But I like the idea of you just traveling to different locations and the remote nature of it, right? And also the forest too, it just showing up on this forest path. There's something about the vibe of those two in particular that I really like. These are some beautiful looking lands. So people are going to be wanting to snag those up. I don't know exactly how far they're going with Doctor Who in terms of creating like a ton of basically functionally unique cards, but there is a lot going on with all the stuff they've announced today. And the last thing we have to talk about is The Walking Dead. They are finally getting reskinned. So with Throne of Eldraine, specifically with the list cards, you'll have the ability to get reskinned Walking Dead cards that instead of being themed on the TV show will be themed on an actual Magic the Gathering plane, which feels a lot better, and I'm glad to see they've finally gotten around to it. So that wraps up everything we have to talk about today. Big thank you to the channel's patrons for supporting what I do here. You guys rock, and I will see you all, my friends, for the next video or tonight in the live stream over on my other YouTube channel. Link on the screen right now.